Welcome to this webinar briefing by the Jerusalem Press Club. I'm Talia Dekel. As we enter Ramadan, the intensity of fighting along the northern border remains high, with large salvos of rockets fired over the past 48 hours, including dozens towards the area of Meron. Today, we host Lieutenant Colonel in Reserve Sarit Zehavi, founder and CEO of the Alma Center, an education and research center on Israel's security challenges in the north. Zahavi is an expert on the Middle East, Iran, Lebanon, Syria, and Hezbollah, and a specialist on terrorism and aspects of the fight against terrorism. She was an officer in the IDF for 15 years, initially as a research and analysis expert, and later on the Northern Command of the IDF. Hello, Sarit, and thank you so much for joining us at such short notice today.
Thank you for having me.
Sarit, you live in the north yourself. Can you tell us a little bit of what's going on right now as we speak?
Yes, I live 9 kilometers from the Israeli-Lebanese border. It means that I myself was not evacuated. The evacuation of 60,000 Israelis in 43 communities is in a distance of 0 to 5 kilometers from the border. This means that it also affects our lives. I'll give you a small example from my family. In the elementary school, they don't allow the children to go outside in the break. So, they didn't have schools for 2 months, and when they finally came back, they can't go outside. Life are not as they used to be. We hear the sounds of war 24/7, whether it's the hits of the rockets, the interceptions, the artillery, the drones. So even if you don't live in an evacuated community, your life are deeply affected with what's going on. And of course, to add to all of that, the constant fear from another massacre like Hamas executed in Gaza.
Okay, and in terms of what's happening this morning, is everybody safe? Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening on the ground?
I must say this morning is another morning. Is another morning like all the others since October 7th, that we have alerts in various places in the Galilee, in communities. It's no difference. In the past few months, these are not only anti-tanks missiles to short distances, but also the rockets, which are on the one hand intercepted by Iron Dome. That's the good news. But on the other hand, these are barrages of rockets of a few tens. This morning, these were also a few tens of rockets that were launched to a community. Meron is a mountain. On top, there is an army base, but below, there is a community named Meron. Hezbollah claimed responsibility to shoot in against the community. There are alerts in all the communities around. It's just another morning. It happens all the time. There was last week we had rockets that fell on the main road to Nahariya. My son was there 20 minutes afterwards. It's the main road. We drive there every day. It's not something special. The only thing that we see is that sided with the anti-tanks, that we don't have alerts and cannot be intercepted by Iron Dome. We see also shooting of rockets. This is something that is happening more and more in the past, I think, month and a half or 2 months, something like that, with barrages of rockets. And that's why you see a lot of hits as well. Iron Dome cannot intercept all of them.
Understood. And what is your analysis in whether this is going to develop into something even more significant tomorrow, next week? How long will it take? Will it eventually happen? Or is this going to be a stagnant situation for an unknown amount of time?
No, it can't be forever because of the evacuated people. People are 5 months out of their homes, spread in hotels all over the country. Only recently the government extended the compensation until July. So it means that by July they have to go back home, and we'll have to figure it out how this will happen. I want to say 2 things. I want to talk about Ramadan, and I want to talk about solution in general. Let's start with Ramadan because this is more immediate. If there is an Iranian decision to inflame the situation, it doesn't matter whether it's West Bank, inside Israel, in Gaza, or in the north, if there is this kind of decision to use Ramadan as an advantage to inflame all arenas in Israel, it doesn't matter what Israel will do, it will happen. because if there is a decision, it will happen. The problem is that we don't know whether there is a decision like that. If there isn't a decision, a situation can deteriorate with, as we always say, a small match that can light everything up. And I think in this respect, there is also a role to the Israeli authorities to prevent that. But we don't know whether there is a decision to take advantage of Ramadan. But it is definitely troubling. I'll give you an example. There were fake publications that Israel gave a deadline to Hezbollah to get a diplomatic agreement until March 15. Israel denied that. We didn't give any deadline. Who published that? It was published in a Lebanese newspaper, El Akhbar, which is affiliated with Hezbollah. Who had the interest to publish that? It's an open question. So this is with regard to Ramadan. I want to say something with regard to solutions. You asked me about solutions. We don't oppose, people that are living here are not oppose a diplomatic arrangement. The thing is that we are against a diplomatic arrangement that will bring us back to the situation as it was in October 6, because this would mean another massacre. Hezbollah was fully prepared for war and including invasion into Israel, into the Galilee in October 6. And for some reason that none of us has the knowledge, we just can evaluate. None of us know exactly why it didn't invade eventually. I believe that the Iranians didn't plan to send Hezbollah at first place. They planned to sacrifice Hamas, but it doesn't matter. The bottom line is that the capability exists, the ideology exists, and Hezbollah continue to threaten an invasion as we speak in its different platforms in digital media. And these threats are being made in Arabic, meaning it's also to its own audience, to its own people, to send the message that it is prepared to do that against the state of Israel. We can not allow Hezbollah to continue to have these capabilities. Now, the arrangement that is now being discussed, by the way, discussed between us, Hezbollah refused to any negotiations, sent Amos Hochstein back home. Hezbollah said very clearly, we will negotiate only once there is a ceasefire in Gaza. But all the proposals that were made by the West until now, as far as they were published, okay, what we see in the media, are proposals that basically brings us back to October 6, because the enforcement relies on the same arrangement of 1701 from 2006, meaning United Nations and Lebanese Army. There is no deadline in these proposals, and they don't speak about disarm. They speak about withdrawal. Withdrawal of whom? Hezbollah is a local force. They are based inside South Lebanon. They live there. It's their homes there. They are not going to withdraw from their homes. So we should speak about disarm rather than pushback or withdrawal. We should put a deadline to enable our people to go back home, and we should make sure that there is an effective enforcement mechanism rather than UNIFIL that is not entering private territories or Lebanese army that collaborates with Hezbollah.
So what is this enforcement mechanism? Who is responsible for it? What does it look like? And how can it be achieved?
So if there will be an agreement that will include all these principles that I've just mentioned, so a diplomatic solution is an option. I am not sure, I'm pretty much sure that it will not happen, that Hezbollah will not allow it. And if Hezbollah will not allow it, eventually Israel will have to do a military operation at that scale or another to bring its people home. And here I must say, this is taken in consideration by Hezbollah itself. That's why it put us in such an unbearable situation, because they know that it might develop into something else. They're not going to be surprised if Israel will do so. I believe that my leadership is not interested in this. My leadership is interested in a diplomatic arrangement. And that's why what you see now is that the IDF is trying to gain, kind of choosing a third path, trying to gain as many military achievements against Hezbollah as possible, also initiate strikes against Hezbollah headquarters and warehouses and terrorist infrastructures in South Lebanon. But I'm not sure that all these strikes are enough to bring security to the people of the north. And I'm not sure that these strikes actually damaging the military arrays of Hezbollah in a sense that it will not endanger us in the future.
So then what is the next step that we're essentially missing, assuming that a diplomatic solution at the moment isn't going to work, specifically because of what you mentioned in that Hezbollah won't negotiate with Israel until it ends its war in Gaza, which is obviously not an option right now. So assuming that a diplomatic solution isn't in the works right now, what is this next step that you expect of the defense echelon to take? And if you can also maybe give a few words on what the terrain looks like right now in terms of the tunnels. There's a fear that's continuing on our borders as well.
Look, I don't know what will happen. I'm telling you the truth as a resident of the Galilee. I wake up every morning and I ask, what will happen to us? How is this going to end? What's the solution? I ask the same question just from a very personal level, because if there wouldn't be an answer to our security, this make me ask questions about defending my own family. This is as deep as it is. So I don't know. I can say that every solution that we talk about, it's not a full solution. It's not going to bring peace and love in the Middle East, okay? Neither war nor a diplomatic arrangement. War comes with a price. A diplomatic arrangement comes with a price. I don't know how this is going to play out eventually. I just try to portray the interest of the different players over here. I don't even know what to wish for. We usually evaluate what we wish for. I don't even know what to wish for. I know that war comes with a high price, and I know that if the arrangement, the insufficient arrangement that is now being discussed will be accepted, we are facing the next massacre. And I don't want even to imagine that. As for the tunnels, I can say the terrain, okay, let's divide it to military capabilities and terrain. The terrain itself is very different from Gaza, and this is something that is important to bear in mind, also with regard to any future maneuver in Lebanon, because it's not flat, it is challenging, it is hills and valleys and trees. It's very, very different. On the other hand, it is not as crowded as Gaza. It is easier to evacuate population. By the way, in the villages that are close to the border, the Lebanese have already evacuated. There are 90,000 Lebanese that evacuated by the Lebanese authorities. That's the numbers that are being published this week. So this is with regard to the terrain itself. With regard to the tunnels, there are around 5 different types of tunnels. There are the tactical tunnels, which means that enable Hezbollah to fight in the terrain if there is an invasion, and to hide in these tactical tunnels below the houses, just like you saw happens now in Gaza with the IDF raids against Hamas in the towns. Khan Yunis is a good example. Are there more border crossing tunnels? It's a good question. IDF blocked 6 of these in 2018. Maybe there are more. We don't know exactly. Maybe there are also approaching tunnels. Approaching tunnels means that they stop before the border, and that way enable Hezbollah to try to cross the border with 0 alert to us. There are explosive tunnels that were meant to collapse everything that is on top. They are actually blocked, but there are explosives inside, and if they explode, they create a lot of damage below. And there are strategic tunnels meaning just like you saw with Hamas. These are tunnels that can enable Hezbollah to transfer forces, either military operatives or even launchers and munitions, from one area to another, from Beirut to the south, or from the Bekaa Valley to the south. These are wide tunnels, hundreds of kilometers. And I am aware, again, you ask about the terrain, I'm aware of the fact that the terrain is very different. It is much more difficult to drill tunnels in rocks. That's the terrain in Lebanon. But on the other hand, Hezbollah had 40 years. The project started in the 90s, maybe even in the 80s.
Okay, very clear. One journalist is asking about what Israel said that it would be sufficed with Hezbollah complying with 1701, that is pushing Hezbollah fighters north of Litani River. But the real threat also lies in the long-range missiles, the ballistic missiles that Hezbollah can launch from much further away. Do you know if the Air Force or the Army has some kind of plan to preemptively strike these rocket launchers before they can actually be used? Would it do so if needs be?
The IDF always have plans. Eventually, the decision is in the hands of the political level. So we don't know what the decision would be. You can take an example from 2006. The strategic arrays of Hezbollah were attacked pretty early. Again, as a resident of the Galilee, I hope this will happen, but it is important to bear in mind that these rockets are hidden, missiles are hidden inside the homes of the Lebanese in Beirut, in the center of Beirut.
Right, a tactic that we know from other areas. Do we know if Hezbollah holds other more sophisticated military assets other than the ones we've discussed?
It's important to talk about the PGMs, precision-guided missiles. We don't know how many they have, but it seems like that maybe they have a little bit more than what we assessed in the past. And to various ranges, meaning that there are two projects here. There is one project of what we call Fatah 110 or M600. These are the types of the missiles, which are missiles to around 300 kilometers range. And there is another project to shorter missiles or rockets. Again, I am not an engineer, so I can't talk of the difference, but the bottom line is that it's a project that deals with rockets that are to shorter ranges of around 100 kilometers, maybe even less. And if these are also accurate, the threat to the state of Israel is a little bit different because, as I've said, Iron Dome intercept all these kinds of rockets, but not 100%. And every attack of, every miss of Iron Dome, these kind of attacks can cause a lot of damage in Israel to various infrastructures. And Hezbollah itself published a few years ago, Nasrallah in his own voice said that it is going to target civilian infrastructures in Israel with these missiles.
You mentioned earlier on that it's really a matter of choice if Iran decides to step things up for Ramadan or not. Do you know what Israel is doing vis-a-vis the international community to try to influence that decision, perhaps behind the scenes?
I don't think that Israel can influence the Iranian decision. I hope that we are doing enough with regard to international communities. There is tons of work to do with the international community. But I truly don't know what is being done.
Are you concerned at all that talk in the United States or pressure against providing Israel with arms or with defense capabilities because of internal politics might impact Israel's ability to defend itself at the end of the day in the case of a full-blown war?
Yes, I'm concerned. I'm concerned. I feel that there is less and less motivation in international community that Israel will win against Hamas, and this troubles me a lot because it's a bad message to Hezbollah as well, and it's a bad message to Iran as well. And Israel here is not just fighting our fight, it is fighting the fight of the Western world against a radical ideology. This is not Israel-Hamas war. This is Israel's war against a radical ideology that used the Palestinians' blood or the Gazians' blood to its own purposes. And I'm very sorry that if we will not be able to finish what we had started in Gaza, the suffering of the Gazians will continue and there will be no future, new future for them. Now we have an opportunity to build a new Gaza and to build a new future, which Israel cannot do by itself, it is clear, because the Gazians will not accept us as the builders. This should come from somebody else, but this is an opportunity. But if we will not finish it, we are going to be attacked by Hezbollah constantly because they will learn that you can massacre Israelis and get out of it.
Right, of course, they sense this.
And I must add one more sentence. I have this on my neck. You know why? Because it could have been me. Because the idea of taking civilians as hostages to become human shield exists in the offensive plan of Hezbollah as they themselves published a decade ago. It's not Hamas' idea, it's Hezbollah's idea, and it was published, and they plan to do that. It could have been me and my family. And we have to make sure that it will not happen again from any front in Israel.
Absolutely clear. Another journalist is asking, bringing us back to the northern border, if Israeli forces do try to push Hezbollah north of Litani, what would be different from previous incursions, even as late as the Second Lebanon War?
Everything, because Hezbollah is different in a sense that in its years in Syria, it became a terrorist army. And the amount of missiles in the hands of Hezbollah are much greater, and the accuracy of these missiles are much greater, and the experience of its infantry forces is very different. Their performance, and we've seen this in Syria, is very different from what it used to be in 2006. And that's why, and I think IDF is aware of that, that's why we know that another war in Lebanon is going to be much more challenging. And as I've said, I believe that my government is not interested in that.
Just a couple more questions before we wrap up. We've talked obviously about the different technologies and threats that we might be facing in Israel, but we saw that even an anti-tank missile is enough to take human life, and more than one on single incidents as well. And you mentioned that, of course, that there's no way of knowing that it's coming, no red alert siren. Is there anything else that can be done in order to signal that a threat is on the way? Or
no, we don't have an answer to the anti-tanks unless we are inside the tank. But these anti-tanks are not only launched against tanks, they are mostly launched against homes, against people, against soldiers, against positions. Whatever, Hezbollah is proud of the fact that it is launching anti-tank missiles against tanks. It is publishing it, against the homes, I'm sorry. It is publishing the outcomes and the hits in the homes, and you can see some of the pictures behind me over there. We don't have an answer to that. Maybe somebody is already working in our industries on an answer, but it will, if there will be an answer, it will take a long time.
Just wrapping up with a technical question. One journalist has asked me if you could just indicate which outlets are providing the platforms for Hezbollah making threats that it will invade Israel, if there was something specific over the last
he can just text me and I will send him the videos. It's all the Hezbollah spokes, Telegram, Twitter, all the social media. This is happening all the time. I have a package of videos that they publish after the war started. It is happening all the time.
Right, we're now used to these social media platforms being a place for spreading their.
And by the way, in Alma Center, we even translated some of these materials to English, and in some of the materials are translated by Hezbollah to English, and the claiming of responsibility. We have an average weekly of 50 claiming responsibility by Hezbollah for strikes against Israel. Weekly, okay? And some of them are being published in English as well. So there is no lack of materials. And if you can text me, I will text you back the link to their Telegram.
Sure, and we'll happily distribute any other information that you might have for our journalists. Lieutenant Colonel Sarit Zehavi, founder of the Alma Research Institute in the North, thank you so much for your time, and hopefully the next time we speak will be under better circumstances.
I hope so. The Galilee is beautiful, and I hope we'll know better times and you will be able to come as tourists and visit here.
Amen. Thank you so much to everyone who joined, and to Yonatan Beck for facilitating this call. Goodbye, everyone.